Hi, I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota. Today I want to talk about the tragic and early passing of the artist Sinead O'Connor. And there are so many things to unpack in this story, so let's get started. The first thing I want to say is that she died way too soon. And, very often they say that especially women celebrities tend to not live as long as the average person. And you think about it, the stress, the pressure, being in the public eye, and all the expectations on the person who is the celebrity. I think it must take an enormous toll. But for Sinead O'Connor in particular, I think there were some very specific issues. First of all, she didn't want to play the game. She was a staunch feminist. She didn't want to be the kind of woman that the pop industry wanted her to be. There was a time when she was interviewed on CBC with Tom Power, and she was saying that very shocking moment in which she tore up the picture of the Pope was a liberation for her because it freed her of the expectations of pop celebrity, and she was able to just be the artist that she was instead of the celebrity that the industry wanted her to be. And I thought that was so telling because she wanted to be an artist. She did not want to be a pop star. But when you get into the business, it's not always your choice about the kind of artist you want to be. I remember watching the movie A Star is Born, which was the newest version of it with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. And when she was discovered, she was this very regular young woman wearing jeans and t-shirts and just belting out her songs. And then she got picked up by this manager who immediately made her into a pop idol, dyed her hair, changed the way she sang and the way she danced, and she was suddenly like Lady Gaga at the very beginning. So it's a very interesting story, and I wonder how much of it was related to Lady Gaga's beginnings and how she got turned into a pop star initially, as opposed to the artist that clearly she wants to be. So back to Sinead O'Connor, here she is, freed from the expectations of having to be a pop star on the one hand, but on the other hand, getting this enormous amount of hate for that action, even though this was a woman who stated in public that she had been abused by Catholic priests and stated how she was very deeply offended herself by the cover-ups of all the abuse toward children by priests. And so she had a reason for her actions, maybe not a reason that everyone would agree with, but still she had a reason. And this was her own childhood trauma that was being represented in this act, and her own anger at the institution and at the head of this institution, the Pope, who she felt had condoned all this abuse toward children, of which she was one. So here she was doing this very dramatic act on live TV, on Saturday Night Live, which had at that time a very, very wide-ranging audience. And of course, she was pilloried. She was persona non grata, and she got a lot of negativity after that. And there are people who've done far worse. There are men who have long careers of abusing women, and yet not nearly receiving the kind of hatred as Sinead O'Connor did. And you wonder how much of it had to do with the fact that she was female, and how much did it have to do with the fact that she was, at least on a symbolic level, attacking a male authority figure. So this poor woman, I really felt for her because she made her statement and it freed her, but boy, the consequences were very, very steep. And then the other thing that I always wondered about her was, how did she survive in this world afterwards? Because with all the hatred and all the attacks and death threats and everything, how did she just live her life? It must have been very hard. She must have been under an enormous amount of pressure, and it makes me very sad for her. It makes me sad as a human being thinking about another human being. Whether or not I have an opinion about her act, ripping up the photo, I think that the consequences seem to be more than she deserved, right? Especially since I think people have done far worse than tear up a photo of an authority figure in this world and have had far fewer consequences, especially when they were white males who were entrenched in the power system. Think of some orange people recently who have done far worse and bragged about it in public. Let's say no more. But going back to Sinead O'Connor, here she was living her life. So she had a family, she had 4 children, and then sadly, one of her children, her son, age 17, committed suicide not that long ago. And I think that must have been just a devastating, devastating blow for her. And when we think about mothers or parents whose children commit suicide, it's unimaginable. Bad enough to lose your child, horrendous loss, but to lose your child to suicide, there's no words. So here she was, having received all this hatred from the media, from the music industry, from previous supporters, previous fans, and now she loses her son. So this poor woman has experienced so much hardship, so much hatred. And again, now she has this loss. Did she get the support she needed? Did she get the mental health support, the emotional support? I don't know. I hope so, but it's impossible to know because she's a public person, but also a private person, and we can't know if she got what she needed to get through that unimaginable loss. Being a feminist is a very unpopular stance these days. I've noted that when I write an article that has a feminist bent, I get very few responses. It's almost like people just ignore it. It kind of reminds me of when I write articles about global warming. I get kind of similar people ignoring it. But I think it's very telling because half the world is women, and I'm writing articles to support women, and yet, even though most of my audience are women, they don't seem taken with the messages. And, to me, it's unfortunate, but it doesn't really affect me. But I imagine Sinead O'Connor, this feminist who has shaved her head, who has presented herself in a way that's saying, I'm not going to bow down to the patriarchy. And as a much more public figure, far more public figure than me, the kind of backlash she received must have been terrible. And for me, okay, I get ignored if I write about feminism. For her, when she presents to the world as a feminist, she gets hatred, she gets much worse. And it's so sad because feminists, what we want is not to take away what the other half of the population, i.e. men, have. We want to share. We want to be treated as equals. We want to be given the same rights, privileges, and opportunities. And we want to be treated with respect and not seen as objects to be pretty and to be gratifying to men and to be pleasing. We want to be seen as equal human beings and treated like we are equal human beings. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation, to be paid as equal human beings, to be given the same opportunities as other human beings. But somehow, a lot of women, I think, are afraid to call themselves feminists and to join together with other feminists because they're afraid that men won't like them. Because there's the eternal question, if I say X, maybe a guy won't want me. If I say Y or do Y, maybe a guy will disapprove of me. And so here we are again, waiting for the man's approval, acceptance, understanding, and then maybe we can act. And Sinead O'Connor didn't wait for anybody's approval. Certainly not when she tore up the picture of the Pope. She wasn't waiting for any man's approval, acceptance, understanding. She just went ahead and did what she did. Now, there were definite consequences. Maybe she would have preferred to have thought about it, but she said she didn't regret it, so I have to take her word for it. It would be lovely if more women could be a little less concerned with whether or not a man or men in general would approve of them or understand them or accept them if they were true to themselves, if they just did what they wanted to do, and if they saw themselves more as full human beings with all the rights and privileges and opportunities and deserving of respect rather than as objects for the gratification of men's desires. So just something to think about that Sinead O'Connor has inspired certainly me and hopefully many other women with that regard. Sinead O'Connor was diagnosed with a number of different mental health conditions over the years. She was diagnosed as bipolar and as borderline and other things. And the problem with diagnosing mental health conditions is that it's not an exact science. A lot of conditions are very similar to one another, and they present differently in each individual. So one person with bipolar disorder might look quite different than another person with bipolar disorder, and one person with borderline personality disorder might look quite different than another. So who knows what she might have had, or if she had anything. The other problem is, of course, who diagnosed her. Were these really qualified individuals, or were they people who were maybe not as qualified? So she was diagnosed, and as I have said in a previous video, this was her label, and it's a way sometimes for others to dismiss the things that she says and does. They could say, well, she's crazy, so we don't have to take her seriously. We don't have to take her political statements, her anti-war statements, her feminist statements seriously because she's a nut. And that's a very common way that the patriarchy silences women. We're crazy, we're hysterical, we're on the rag, we're out of balance, so our words don't have to be taken seriously. We don't have to be taken seriously as people because, we're nuts. We're hysterical women. And I feel bad for Sinead O'Connor because I think whatever she was struggling with, if it was a mental health issue, it still did not negate the importance of her message. We can have mental health issues and still have an important message to share with the world. We can have a serious mental health condition and still have perfectly reasonable opinions and ideas that are well researched and well informed and that make a lot of sense. So we should not, with her or with anyone, negate their points of view, whether or not they might have a mental health condition. The mental health condition that they may or may not have does not in any way negate the things that they have to say and the message that they want to share with the world. Another thing that people have criticized Sinead O'Connor about was how she changed religion. She grew up Catholic. For a while, she was quite Christian, and then she converted to Islam a few years ago. And that's another reason for people to dismiss the things she had to say. They can say, well, she doesn't even know what religion she is. She's this, then she's this, then she's this. But again, Bob Dylan went through a lot of different religious transformations. Cat Stevens went through religious transformations. Terence Trent D'Arby went through religious transformations, and nobody attacked them for that. So again, interestingly, why would they attack Sinead O'Connor over it? Could be because she's a woman. I think a lot of it comes down to that. That's just my own personal opinion. But I think that men are given a lot more leeway for their own personal exploration, whether it's spiritual, religious, whatever. And I think that for women, it can be another quote unquote sign of instability. So a man is exploring and a woman is unstable. A man is ambitious and a woman is aggressive. A man is outspoken and a woman is strident. And it's the same kinds of behavior, but looked through different lenses based on whether we're male or female. And I feel like Sinead O'Connor had many interesting things to say in her music and in her advocacy, and perhaps was not taken as seriously as she could have been if she had been a man. Now, the other piece is how she was part of the music industry, and it is well known that the music industry is tremendously unfair to the artists in so many ways, in the way that they're paid, in the way that they're produced, and in the way that they are treated. And I feel for Sinead O'Connor because she wanted to be an artist, and she, like so many in the industry, was not well treated. And I wonder how much of all of these things contributed to her untimely demise. We don't know yet how she died, but whatever reason, stress does not help with longevity. Stress does not help us have long, healthy lives. And certainly she was the recipient of an enormous amount of pressure, and I'm sure she experienced an enormous amount of stress, and I feel for her. So whatever our opinion of Sinead O'Connor, I think that she was a tremendous artist. I've been listening to one of her albums lately. I do not want what I haven't got, and I think it's just absolute poetry. It's just beautiful. Even her interpretation of the Prince song, Nothing Compares to You. And I really feel like this woman deserved so much more from us, so much more support, understanding, and sympathy. And I wonder if she were a guy, if she would have been thought of as an anti-hero, you know, the bad boy, and she would have been celebrated for it, as so many quote unquote bad boys are. And instead, she was really treated badly. So let us celebrate her, even if it's posthumously. Let us all give her the credit she's due, and maybe use this as a lesson moving forward, that when a woman has the same kind of behavior as a man, that we would accept and even celebrate. Maybe we shouldn't attack and criticize her in the way that we did with Sinead O'Connor. I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota. Please stay tuned for more videos on mental health and wellness.